up here with me, and we are expecting one more member. We will take public speakers on the ordinance under consideration. Because of the rules of council, I would like to be respectful of everyone's time and be clear that if I feel that comments are veering off topic of Ordinance 1458-2016, I will ask speakers to redirect their comments and then ask speakers to be seated if they cannot stay on topic. I will take it as a yielding of the rest of your time. Additionally, please refrain from cheering or booing out of respect for all of our members and their time to address the committee. This hearing goes from 5:30 now to 7 o'clock, and we will alternate between for pro ordinance and against ordinance. We'll go 1 and 1 up until 7 o'clock, and then the hearing will conclude. I think those are all the rules. Additionally, in testimony, do not include obscenity, defamation, or slander. Of course, you all seem like very respectful people, so I don't think that will be a problem. So those are all the rules I need to go over. I'm going to do an introduction of this ordinance, which I think you all know I am sponsoring. I believe that women deserve to be able to access their constitutionally protected right, and healthcare workers deserve to be able to do their jobs, all without fear of harassment, violence, and intimidation. Yet the reality we see is different. In the last 5 years, our city's reproductive healthcare clinics have seen a 170% increase in police calls for things like disturbances, assault or hospital report, alarms, vehicle obstruction, etc. And this spring, Columbus's Planned Parenthood on East Main made national news for being the first major act of vandalism in Ohio at a clinic since the fatal shooting in Colorado Springs. All of that is why we're here today. Under consideration is Ordinance 1458-2016. Thank you to council members Mitch Brown, Priscilla Tyson, Shannon Hardin, and Jiza Page for joining this public hearing. And thank you to all of you for being here to make your voices heard. This legislation ensures that women will receive the respect and dignity they deserve when seeking reproductive health care. If enacted, the ordinance prevents any person from doing the following: preventing access to reproductive health care services, physically obstructing or blocking another person from entering the clinic, following and harassing another person within 15 feet of the facility, and or behaving in a way that places another person in reasonable fear of physical harm. Additionally, it protects providers and clinic workers, allowing them to perform their vital jobs without fear. Violation of any of the above is a misdemeanor of the first degree. This measure would be new law and amends the code for Chapter 2317 regarding public conduct. While we condemn violent and intimidating protest, I simultaneously support the free speech rights of our Constitution. That's why this ordinance does not inhibit or punish peaceful protest or prayer vigils. Instead, it ensures that, that women and clinic workers can access and provide legal medical care without fear of harassment and intimidation. There is no other legal health service that people are blocked from accessing. There is no other legal health situation where strangers feel entitled to impose their will on someone else. Passage of the Healthcare Worker and Patient Protection Ordinance ensures that women can access any type of reproductive healthcare service without threat or intimidation. That is why I've sponsored this ordinance, and that is why we're here today. Again, I want to thank my council colleagues for coming to hear public comment. Just as a reminder, comments need to be germane to Ordinance 1458-2016. And again, if I feel that comments are off topic, I will ask speakers to redirect. When you come up to speak, which is, I believe, at this microphone right here, speakers must state their name, address, and any organizations they may represent, again, per council rules. Speakers have 3 minutes, again, per council rules, at which time you'll hear an alert indicating that your time is concluded. The members of the panel who offered testimony will have the opportunity to address any questions from public speakers, and council members will have the opportunity to comment as well. So I would like to start with from the City Attorney's Office, excuse me again, I'm getting a cough, Laura Baker-Morrish, who is Chief Prosecutor.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. The Columbus City Attorney's Office was contacted by the Office of Councilmember Brown regarding the intention to enact an ordinance dealing with reproductive health protection. We were asked to review House Bill 408, and we did take a look at House Bill 408, and the provisions that were criminal provisions were then referred to the Prosecutor Division of the City Attorney's Office. It's not uncommon for our office to review pending criminal legislation just to make sure that it is enforceable, that it is constitutional, and to make sure that we've given advice to council members regarding how best to craft language for criminal ordinances. So that is what we did. We took a look at 408. The provisions that have been outlined by Councilmember Brown that are enacted within this ordinance, the criminal provisions, which is B sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, came from House Bill 408. The additions that we made in reviewing those particular provisions were to add a definition of premises, which is consistent with the definition of premises that comes from the criminal trespass statute. We also added a modified definition of harass. 408 also included a definition of harass, but unfortunately it defined harass by using the word harass, and we didn't feel that that was very clear. So what we did instead was we looked to existing case law and existing language from the disorderly conduct statute. The harass definition had already included being alarmed or annoyed. Both of those provisions are already within the disorderly conduct statute, but disorderly conduct also includes inconvenienced. So we used the same three words that define what disorderly conduct behavior is to include into the definition of harass, and then we kept the rest of that definition from 408. The actual provisions of the law that are being proposed are different from existing provisions of the Columbus City Code and from the state code. They're different in that they get at behavior that's not covered by other statutes. For instance, B1 indicates no person shall knowingly do any of the following: physically obstruct or block another person from entering into or exiting from the premises of a reproductive health care facility by physically striking, shoving, restraining, grabbing, or otherwise subjecting the person to unwanted physical contact or attempting or threatening to do the same. While there are provisions of this statute that might also be covered by the assault and menacing statutes, the assault and menacing statutes do not cover the laundry list of behaviors that are included in this particular prohibition. For instance, shoving, striking, restraining, grabbing under different circumstances, and the general use of the words unwanted physical conduct don't constitute the offense of assault within the city code or the Ohio Revised Code. And this language is a little bit more broad to talk about other behaviors that might not rise to the level of an assault, but that are blocking or physically obstructing a person from entering the facility. The second section, no person shall knowingly obstruct or block the premises of a reproductive health care facility so as to impede access to or from the facility or attempt to do the same. There's a provision of the disorderly conduct statute that is similar in that it talks about impeding or hampering an individual's free exercise or free ability to walk within private or public property. However, this particular statute goes beyond that, and it talks about not just hindering, but actually obstructing or blocking. And that's why there's a distinction that this is a misdemeanor of the first degree and disorderly conduct is a misdemeanor of the fourth degree. Violating this actually obstructs or blocks. Violating disorderly conduct is hindrance. There's also two different degrees of culpable mental state. To violate the disorderly conduct provision, recklessness is all that's required. To violate this statute, it must be done knowingly, and the prosecution would have to prove that it was knowingly done. The third provision, to follow and harass another within 15 feet of the premises of a reproductive health care facility. There's not currently a provision of the city code or the state code that discusses or prohibits this kind of behavior. This particular provision came from the New York City Ordinance. It was referenced favorably in a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, and it was distinguished from simple harassment by the virtue of the fact that it would have to also be following and harassing at the same time. In other words, we're not looking specifically at speech, we're looking at conduct, and it's only within 15 feet of the reproductive health care facility.
We're not talking about anything that happens outside of that, and we're not talking about simply what someone might constitute as harassment or feel as harassing. It has to be following and harassing at the same time. The last provision, engage in a course of conduct or repeatedly commit acts within 15 feet of the premises of a reproductive health care facility when that behavior places another person in reasonable fear of physical harm. Again, it's not just engaging in conduct that somebody would find offensive or somebody would find harassing. As a matter of fact, harassing is not in this provision. It's behavior that places a person in reasonable fear of physical harm, actual physical harm, taunting behavior, threats of violence, rising up of hands as if to strike somebody. That's the kind of behavior that would be included within the provision outlawed by B4. That also makes it distinct from disorderly conduct, and that is engaging in a course of conduct, not just one act. So it contemplates the idea that this is repeated behavior that's being penalized in this particular provision to raise it to the level of a misdemeanor of the first degree. So those are the provisions that were provided in 408. Those are the ones that the city attorney's office then reviewed as to potential constitutional challenges. We made the recommended changes of adding the premises provision and made the modifications to the harass section. The other thing that we did was recommend that a provision that exists in 408 not be enacted in the city code, and that dealt with the vandalism provision. And the reason for that is that vandalism is already a felony under the state code, and it's impermissible for a city ordinance to make a misdemeanor what would be a felony, and it's impermissible for a city ordinance to enact a felony. So we said that that had to be left with the revised code.
Thank you. Are there any questions from my colleagues for City Attorney? Can you just, on the third provision, the follow and harass, clarify again what the prosecution would have to prove in an instance that someone brought a charge?
Right. First of all, we'd have to prove that whatever behavior is being alleged occurred within 15 feet of the premises. So there would actually be a requirement that we prove that it happened within a specified distance from a premises location or premises entryway. A second thing, we'd have to prove that the individual was in fact feeling harassed, and that could be based upon testimony regarding the behavior of that individual in response to what was going on, or their actual testimony regarding how they felt at that time. Harass would be defined by statute as, again, being seriously alarmed, annoyed, or inconvenienced, and they would have to testify that that's how they felt based upon the behavior. But third, we'd also have to demonstrate that harassment's not enough. Standing and yelling at somebody from 15, 20 feet away, even something that's offensive to that person in and of itself would not violate this provision. We'd have to prove that the person was being followed. In other words, that they were trying to get into the reproductive health care facility. Another individual was trailing them and saying these to them as they were trying to access the actual facility. And that's what would have to be proven to prove a violation of B3.
Okay, and my understanding is that that follow addition was one thing that you took sort of modeled off of the New York City ordinance that Supreme Court had mentioned favorably, and basically added it because with an eye to constitutionality.
Well, I think the original drafter to 408 added it for that purpose, and then when we were, reviewing it, that's when we looked to the U.S. Supreme Court and found that it was favorably commented upon by the Supreme Court, and that is because it is not just language, it's language plus action within a particular area.
Okay, thank you. All right. If there are no other questions, I would like to ask Tiffany Kraus to please speak. She is the administrator of the Clinical Health Division at the Department of Public Health.
Chairwoman Brown and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak about the Healthcare Worker and Patient Protection Ordinance, which will protect all healthcare workers and patients from obstruction and harassment as they access healthcare and reproductive facilities. Again, my name is Tiffany Kraus, and I'm the administrator of the Clinical Health Division at Columbus Public Health, where our mission is to protect health and improve lives. To fulfill this vital mission, we provide community-based programs and services, walk-in birth and death records, direct clinical, educational, and basic health care services such as immunizations, women's health and family planning services, sexually transmitted infection testing, and treatment in our health clinics at 240 South Parsons Avenue. As a result, more than 1,000 visitors and 500 employees pass through our doors every single weekday. It's important to note that our clients generally have an excellent experience accessing our clinical services. In fact, I can't recall a time when protesters kept them from our facilities. However, we have needed to ask people to leave because of threatening behavior or intimidating language directed to our staff or our clients. While most of these were known to the person receiving services in our building, their outbursts still cause a disturbance that is not healthy, supportive, or welcoming to clients or others in our waiting rooms. For example, we recently had a patient come in to be tested for a sexually transmitted infection. She brought her partner with her, and when she informed him that he also needed to be tested, he got angry and started to yell. He called her derogatory names and then directed harassing language to the general waiting room. His outburst caused at least one client to leave before getting treatment. This ordinance would prevent a similar situation in the future by ensuring if someone refuses to leave and continues to harass a client or healthcare worker, we would have the authority to have them removed in violation of the law. The bottom line is, all patients and providers in our city deserve healthcare that is free of intimidation and violence. No patient should ever be afraid to come in and see their healthcare provider or be harassed or intimidated for seeking the critical services they need for good health. Healthcare providers also should never be harassed, threatened, or intimidated for providing compassionate and comprehensive care to their patients. As a community, we now have the opportunity to protect them both. The Healthcare Worker and Patient Protection Ordinance will ensure all healthcare facilities are free of harassment and intimidation, and it will hold people accountable for unacceptable and frightening tactics. I urge you to support this ordinance on behalf of all residents so we can continue to protect health and improve lives of Columbus. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you in support of this ordinance, and thank you for your time and attention to this important health issue.
Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Are there any comments or questions from my colleagues? Yeah. We have one additional presentation. Officer Prysock, Nicole Prysock. We're just doing a mic switch right now. Thank you, Officer Prysock. If you could just give your background related to this issue so that speakers are aware. We may have questions back and forth that involve your input.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Officer Nicole Prysock. I work for the Columbus Division of Police and Patrol. I have 23 years with the division, and I used to, up to maybe less than a year ago, worked at the Founders Clinic on East Broad Street.
Thank you. Were you special duty at the Founders Clinic?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Okay. Do you remember how many years?
Less than 2.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues for Officer Prysock before we go into speaker slips? Okay. Yeah.
Officer Prysock, if you could just tell us briefly about your experiences there while you were on special duty and any issues that may have arisen with individuals seeking treatment or counseling from the location where you were, and if you had to, I guess, de-escalate any situations.
I worked for the foundation, the Founders Clinic. I was there to make sure that there were no issues between the protesters and the people seeking treatment into the facility, make sure that the protesters did not cross onto the property of the facility, and try to kind of be there as a buffer to make sure that things didn't get out of hand as far as communication between both parties.
Okay. All right, so we will start in on the speaker slips. We will start on the for side, and we'll again go one for one. Miss Kelly Freeman. Yep, if you can go ahead to the microphone, and then again, please state your name, address, and any organization that you're affiliated with.
My name is Kelly Freeman. I reside at 911 East 14th Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. I am currently a healthcare assistant for Planned Parenthood of Greeley, Ohio. Thank you, City Councilwoman Brown and City Council for hearing us tonight. As I stated, I currently work as a healthcare assistant for Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio. Every day I help counsel and guide women who are going through the abortion process, and almost every day I see protesters outside my clinic who are there to harass people who are already having one of, if not the worst day of their lives. I've been working for Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio for about 4 months now, and the first week of work is hard at any job, but anti-choicers took it up a notch. I was on the way back from my mother's funeral when I learned that my new place of employment had been vandalized, and a woman chose to publicly call all of my new coworkers and me a Satan den of baby killers. That is why, in the light of that and the Colorado shooting, the murder of pro-choice doctors, and everyday harassment, it is especially ironic that a protester who mistook me for a patient told me not to be afraid. The fact is, I am afraid every day. I'm afraid for myself, I'm afraid for my coworkers, and most importantly, I'm afraid for my patients. Anti-choice protesters have shown they are capable of violence. They are not content with cheap, cruel intimidation. It is not enough for them to hold gruesome, inaccurate signs. It is not enough for them to yell at patients on their way in. It is not enough for them to greet my coworkers in the alleyway to accuse them of being murderers. It is not enough for them to record patients on their way into the clinic to post on Facebook to shame them. And it is not enough for them to scream so loud that patients can hear them in the room where we help them to try to make the best decision for them and for their family. They are not even content with that. They go further. They mail flyers to every person in one of our doctors' neighborhoods that accuse her of being a murderer. So at this point, my question is, how much more can we let them do before something worse happens here? They're going to keep pushing and pushing to see how far they can go, and I wonder how many more they will intimidate and harass fellow Columbus and Ohio citizens until we say enough is enough. We need this ordinance. We need it to keep us safe. We need to protect our escorts. We need to protect our clinic workers, our doctors, and most importantly, protect our patients. So I ask you at this time, or well, I guess at the end of this, to please pass this ordinance just to make our days easier and to make it so we don't have to be afraid of going to work each day.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Any? Thank you. You may sit down. We will move on to the first speaker against the ordinance, Ms. Laura Morrison. Hi, Ms. Morrison. Again, please, your name and your address, and if you represent any organization other than yourself.
Yes. My name is Laura Morrison. I reside at 533 East Braxton Place in Westerville, Ohio. I just want to say thank you tonight for coming and having this public hearing and allowing us to speak. I'm a wife and a mom, and I spend a lot of time in front of Planned Parenthood on East Main Street, and previously I spent some time at Founders as well. I'd like to ask if it's acceptable if you all have been out to one of these clinics when there has been a presence of people on the sidewalk. Possible to ask that?
Typically, we don't do the back and forth. If you could give your testimony, that would be the best. Thank you.
What I wanted to do was just explain what we do out there, why I go out there, and just try to give you a firsthand perspective. We go out there, my heart is to offer help, because a woman going into Planned Parenthood could have been me. That could have been my story. I could have been walking into Planned Parenthood seeking an abortion. We all have a past. So my heart when I go out there is to offer help to these women. Yes, to plead with them. We all know that abortion ends a human life in the womb. It's a fact. So we go out there to be the advocate for that baby in the womb, that tiny human in the womb, to share truth via words and pictures. We go out there to come alongside the women and offer them help, to say, hey, I am willing to help you. What is it that's driving you to make this decision? How can I help you? Yes, there's a free clinic across the street, but me as a citizen of Ohio that lives in Westerville who has an open bedroom, what can I do to help you? We offer literature. We offer prayer. We read scripture from the Bible. We expose what abortion is because It's available in medical textbooks, and not every woman who makes an appointment for an abortion is shown what abortion does to their child. Why do we do this? I'm a Christian, and I believe that I'm called by Jesus Christ to love all of y'all, everyone in this room, and my neighbors as myself. That's why I go to the clinic, to be an advocate for the women, to love people, even to say things that maybe they don't want to hear at the time. Like the first speaker said, they're having a really bad day if they're going for this appointment. To speak the truth in love. The other thing I wanted to share is just some experiences of the women that we have helped. We have had women be dropped off by men. We don't know who these men are. The men will pull away and either park or leave the woman as she goes into these appointments. We have had women literally run to us on the sidewalk. We had one woman who was crying, scared. She was being coerced into the abortion. She couldn't tell this man that she didn't want it because she was afraid for her life. She didn't feel comfortable going into the clinic. We helped her. Yes.
Timer, so thank you for your testimony, Ms. Morrison. Any questions that you have for? Yeah.
Question actually for Laura.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
No, sorry, this Laura.
Okay.
Can you briefly just describe the 15-foot measurement from the premises? Like, what determines the premises, and kind of what is that 15 feet perimeter?
Okay. I'm having mic problems. Premises is defined as the land, building, structure, or place belonging to, controlled by, or in custody of another. And basically that means 15 feet from an entryway, 15 feet from the building, 15 feet from the parking lot if it's owned by or operated by or leased by the reproductive health facility. So a number of the activities that the last speaker spoke about in terms of having the counseling and the pamphleting and things like that would be prohibited at 16 feet and beyond. And even going and just speaking those words would be permitted by this particular ordinance so long as they were not following and harassing.
And to be on the public sidewalk, how does that fit into this particular ordinance?
It depends greatly on where the public sidewalk is located in reference to the building itself. I have not gone out and actually done the tape measure for the two places that we're looking at. However, even if the public sidewalk is included within the 15 feet of the actual entryway, there is a permission to legislate and to prohibit this kind of conduct within that frame. The government is allowed to regulate time, place, and manner. And this particular ordinance is very narrowly tailored to specific behavior and specific concerns, and it's also not targeting particular kinds of speech. It's talking about following and harassing a person who's trying to access those services.
Thank you. And sorry, another question for Officer Prysock. Yes, in your time at the Foundation, Founders Clinic, I'm sorry. Could you briefly just describe that particular location, like the building, the parking lot, and then like the sidewalk, kind of how that 15 feet will come into play?
It's located on the corner of Sherman and East Broad Street. There's a teachers union right next door, and the buildings next to it. There's an egress in between the two. The Founders Clinic has a parking lot on the back of the facility that belongs to them. And then across the alley, there's an alleyway in the rear, which is where I deal with most of the protesters. There's an alleyway, and then they're allowed to use the parking spaces that are normally allotted to the teachers union. Is it the teachers union building? I'm not sure. That's allotted to the teachers union. They're allowed to use that on Saturdays. So they're also allowed to park there and walk. You can access the clinic walking through the back parking lot, around the side of the building, and up the steps through the front door.
So about how far were the protesters ever allowed on the parking lot of?
They're not allowed on the property of the Founders Clinic.
Okay, so how far do you, with this 15 feet, just if you could give us an idea how far that will push anyone who's there back from the parking lot?
If you're protesting from the sidewalk in front of the building, which is, if you're driving down Broad Street, would be what you see, I would say it's a good 30 to 40 feet from the sidewalk to the front steps of the facility to enter. In the back, you probably have close to 75 maybe to 100 feet without having a measuring stick. That's about from the alley, the parking lot to the door. And then my understanding when I worked there was they were not allowed to come onto the lot that was given to them by the teachers union. They never came up on there. They stayed in the alleyway, the protesters.
Thank you.
So they pretty much would stay where they're located. Right now, right now with 15 feet, they would pretty much stay within the location where they're currently?
Yeah, we always had some issues about, because there's no set line, it's just the alley, and then you literally just pull into the parking lot. There's no sidewalks or anything back there. There's a retention wall on one side, and there was a garage. So they stayed along that, and the protesters do not step on onto the parking lot from there. So that's usually where they hang out. Most of the issues that we had were in the back of the parking lot.
Outside the 15 feet?
Outside of 15 feet.
Okay.
Thank you. We will go to our next speaker slip for the ordinance, Ms. Jamie Miracle. And again, Ms. Miracle, your name, your address, and any organization you're affiliated with, and a reminder of the 3-minute rule, and James's buzzer will go off at that time. Yeah.
My name is Jamie Miracle. I represent NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio. Our office is located on Jefferson Avenue, and I live in the Clintonville neighborhood of Columbus. Thank you, Councilwoman Brown and members of the Columbus City Council. I'm here this evening as a Deputy Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio, and as someone who's lived in the city of Columbus my entire life. I'm proud to be a resident of this great city, and I'm proud that our City Council is taking a strong stand against violence and harassment. Imagine going to work and being greeted with angry men and women screaming, "Dr. Death, murderer," hearing vague references to how maybe someone should kill you because you kill babies, being told by your neighbors that there were people walking around your neighborhood today distributing flyers like this one with your picture under the words "Killer Among Us." Imagine feeling like you must have a remote start mechanism on your car because you're afraid that someone at some point will put an explosive in it, and you want to be able to start it from far enough away that you won't get hurt. Imagine you're going to your doctor's office for a medical procedure. To get to the parking lot, you have to drive through a gauntlet of people gathered in the alley, trying to shove flyers in your windows, yelling at you that you are making the wrong decision, telling you that you will go to hell, or that you're a whore and a murderer. I believe in the right to free speech. It is one of our core values as American citizens, and I'm proud to live in a country where the voices of our opposition are not squashed. But the behaviors that this ordinance will prohibit are not speech. Opponents of the ordinance argue that this will impact their right to protest outside of reproductive health care facilities. Nothing could be further from the truth. Behavior like this is still completely allowed. What will be illegal is behavior like that, which is a picture not blown up from a video of one of the protesters outside of Planned Parenthood approaching one of our people one day. Harassment, intimidation, blocking clinics, following patients and staff. This is what this ordinance prohibits. We will never be able to stop every act of violence or to make everyone behave civilly, but this ordinance is a way to take a situation that is escalating towards violence and stop the escalation before it takes a violent turn. When peaceful protests and prayer turn to harassment and intimidation, it only takes one more step to turn to violence. The people opposing this ordinance today are not here protecting their First Amendment rights because that is still protected. They are here protecting their right to harass, and that should never be accepted. The vandalism on the outside wall of the Planned Parenthood clinic earlier this year was not just words spray painted on a wall. It was a threat, and a threat that our city police department took seriously, and we thank them for that. But we need to make sure that our police officers have the tools they need to de-escalate a situation, and that is exactly what this ordinance does. This ordinance is a balance between our constitutionally protected right to free speech and protest and our government's responsibility to protect the health and safety of its citizens. It passes constitutional muster. In fact, it is modeled after the buffer zone ordinance currently being enforced in New York City, which was mentioned by the U.S. Supreme Court as a model way to enact such an ordinance when it was struck down in Massachusetts. I ask you to pass this resolution, and I thank you for having this hearing today.
Thank you, Ms. Miracle. Are there any follow-up questions for our panel after Ms. Miracle's testimony? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next speaker against the ordinance, Mr. Mark Harrington. If you could please approach the microphone, and I believe I'm reading that correctly. Okay. Again, reminder of the 3-minute rule. Please state your name and address, and if you are affiliated with an organization other than yourself.
Thank you, Speaker Member Brown and distinguished council members. Thank you for having this forum. I think it's an important forum. My name is Mark Harrington. I represent Created Equal, a national organization, pro-life organization. I reside at 4565 Mount Rushmore Court in Columbus. And I've been a pro-life activist for over 20 years in this community. And I can tell you, my organization, the people that work for me, my volunteers, don't do any of this stuff. None of it. Now, let me just say, it's interesting that you, Council Member Brown, bring up the constitutionality of abortion rights. Let's just, for the sake of argument, agree that it's constitutional. I don't agree with that. But why would we pass an unconstitutional ordinance to protect something that's constitutional? That seems just counter to the American way of life. It's anti-American. The answer to offensive speech, and I would agree with Ms. Miracle, the things that are uttered by certain individuals, I would say are abhorrent, and I wouldn't say them myself, and many wouldn't in our organization. But offensive speech or speech that we disagree with should be met with more speech, not less. And we don't turn to government to try to censor people, period. So the reason why we oppose this ordinance are actually it's threefold, but I only deal with 2 of those issues. The first is it's redundant and unnecessary. If you look at the Ohio Revised Code, section 1917.11, it states that no person shall recklessly cause an inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm to anyone doing any of the following. Then it goes on to giving a list of certain types of behaviors that would fall within this category. It's already dealt with. We don't need additional pieces of legislation to deal with it. My organization has been the subject of harassment, if you will, and even violence. Just in the last month alone, June 6, 2016, at Founders Women's Center, we had an individual pull up, roll down their car, and yell this: "I'm going to whoop your A and get the effing signs down, and I'll be back in 10 minutes. Well, we didn't run to the city council and say, well, we need a bubble zone. We need a 15-foot protection area from that individual. You know what we did? We called the Columbus Police. That's what we do. We work hand in glove with the city of Columbus. We notify the city of Columbus when we do our protests, when we express our First Amendment rights. You can talk to Roger Dickinson of the city police department. We're respectful of everyone's rights, but we understand this is a very difficult question, and it needs to have a robust debate. I could go on with the threats, but I won't. If you want to see more of them, go to our Facebook page or go to our YouTube page. So the Ohio Revised Code deals with it. The other thing is it says in the ordinance that obstructing, impeding, and blocking, let me just do this real quick. I want to show you just how unenforceable this provision is. Go out 15 feet.
I understand you're very passionate about
There's 15 feet here. Now, outside of that, I can speak pro-life words. If I step inside, I can't. Tell me how the city of Columbus is going to enforce that. That's what I want to know. How are the city of Columbus and their police department going to enforce that? That's all I have to say.
Due to the 3-minute rule, and I ask that everybody respect it.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks for sitting down. I have a question, and if my colleagues do as well. When you took a look at what should be sort of taken from 408 or new to 408 or withdrawn from 408, you did mention that we can't provide for a felony at the city. So you took into account what existing law is there, and Mr. Harrington did mention current state law. Do you remember looking at that and whether this was duplicative or not?
I did. In answer to the first question, what's the existing state code felony? It's vandalism, and it's an F5. And matter of fact, that's what the individuals, I believe, were charged with out of the Planned Parenthood incident, and it specifically covers the behavior that was covered in 408. And a city ordinance cannot make a misdemeanor that which the state already makes a felony under the vandalism statute, so we couldn't do that. On that, and that's how I advised. Regarding the Ohio Revised Code and the provision that that the gentleman just cited, his name, I'm sorry, was 2917. The disorderly conduct provision is what that is, and that's what I referenced to when I first spoke. We did look at the disorderly conduct ordinance. There are provisions within this reproductive health care ordinance that are distinct from disorderly conduct in terms of both the kinds of behavior, the culpable mental state, and then specifically the follow and harass is not addressed in disorderly conduct at all.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, if you could talk briefly to the culpable mental state, and I know I'm being very technical from a legal standpoint, but could you just talk briefly about recklessly? It sounds like that at least is the culpable mental state in the ORC versus knowingly, which is being proposed in this ordinance.
That's right. The Ohio Revised Code and Ohio law generally delineates a number of different culpable mental states, and depending on what kind of culpable mental states in the statute, I know I'm sounding like a lawyer, it requires the prosecution to prove a little bit more just than you acted, but that you acted with a particular intent or with a particular knowledge or with a particular understanding. So the highest degree culpable mental state is purposely. If I have to prove that you purposely did something, I have to prove that you did it for a specific reason, and I have to be able to demonstrate why you did it for that reason. Right below purposely is knowingly, so knowingly is a pretty high standard. Knowingly is what most offenses of violence require. Assault has knowingly, domestic violence knowingly. It's a higher degree of culpable mental state. I have to prove that you knew a known risk and you took the risk anyway and you did it with intent. Below that is criminal negligence, which we won't discuss because it's not relevant here, and below that is recklessness. Recklessness is what the disorderly conduct statute is. Recklessness is heedless indifference. You don't have to be sitting there thinking, I'm going to do this right now. You're simply acting. So in order to prove a violation under the recklessness statute, it's a much lower burden for the prosecution. It's a higher burden for knowingly for what this ordinance would be. And generally the code follows that, so that offenses that are higher degree offenses tend to have a higher degree of culpable mental state, and offenses that are lower degree offenses tend to have a lower culpable mental state.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving back to the side for the ordinance, speakers for the ordinance, Ms. Amanda Patton, if you could please approach the microphone. Ms. Patton, a reminder of the 3-minute rule. Please state your name, address, and if you are affiliated with an organization other than yourself.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Patton, and my address is 3255 East Main Street. I'm affiliated with Founders Women's Health Center and Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio. I'm here to urge City Council to pass this protection ordinance because I've witnessed firsthand the aggressive tactics of protesters who stand outside of both of those facilities. These protesters are the reason why I now work for abortion providers. The way these people yelled at patients and followed them to their cars disturbed me so much that I offered to restart the volunteer escort program at Founders in 2014. My friends and I began walking patients from their cars to the clinic to help them feel safe, and I eventually became an employee at Founders, which allowed me to see the threatening behavior of protesters on a daily basis. I have countless examples of harassment endured every morning as I walked into the clinic, but I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to speak on behalf of the patients and volunteers who could not speak here today. I've had several patients tell me that protesters followed them so aggressively that they had to literally run away from these protesters. One patient gave us a written statement that said a protester stepped in front of her path and tried to hand her a pamphlet. The patient declined and tried to walk away, but the protester grabbed her arm. This scared the patient so much that she tried to take off running, but before she could get away, the protester yanked her jacket sleeve. The patient retreated to her car, and at that point, the protesters approached her car and continued to harass her. When the clinic asked her if she would like to press charges with the police, she declined because she did not want anyone knowing that she was at an abortion clinic. I understood her reasoning, especially because I've seen how ineffective it is to file a police report when protesters get aggressive. For example, one of my volunteers was physically shoved by a protester, and it upset her so much that she called the police. But by the time the police arrived, the protester had already left, and no further action was taken by the police to deal with this protester. This was there was only one time that I witnessed a Columbus police officer issue a citation to a protester outside of Founders, and it was for public urination. Later, that police officer told me that her supervisor instructed her to stop writing citations to protesters outside of the clinic for fear that the city might get slapped with a lawsuit. It's clear that the current laws are not enough to hold these aggressive protesters accountable for their actions. The point of this story is not to speak ill of Columbus police. I am very grateful for the officers who protect our city, but we need to support our police with clear laws that give them the power to protect our clinics. I'm fully convinced the protesters know what they are doing is wrong because I've seen how different they act when they know that the police or the media are watching. They pretend like they're quiet and peaceful when there's an audience, but as soon as there is no one with power nearby, many protesters go right back to their usual intimidation tactics. I want to thank Councilmember Elizabeth Brown for bringing this issue to light, and I want to thank the council for listening to our concerns. I know I sound really passionate, but having to deal with this day in and day out since 2014 really wears on you, especially when you see how it impacts the patients and the volunteers that you love. I urge passage of this ordinance. Thank you.
Are there any questions from my colleagues for the panel and follow-up? Okay. The next speaker we have on the against side is Elizabeth Johnston. Ms. Johnston, reminder, 3-minute rule, name, address, and if you're affiliated with anyone other than yourself.
My name is Elizabeth Johnston. Wow. My name is Elizabeth Johnston, 5063 Dresden Court, Zanesville, Ohio. Thank you again. Good evening, council members. We thank you for your time. I'd also like to thank Councilwoman Elizabeth Brown for the private meeting that she gave us yesterday. I'm the wife of a family practice medical physician and the mother of 10 beautiful children. My family is on the public sidewalk of Planned Parenthood weekly, offering assistance to moms and dads and rescuing preborn children from death. We are a very busy family, speaking around the country, and we are directors of multiple organizations, but we count our ministry outside Planned Parenthood among the most important work that we do. The purpose of my 3 minutes is to talk about what I learned yesterday with Councilwoman Brown and her staffer, Kelsey. I've been doing this type of work for 20 years, but the lack of due diligence that I witnessed yesterday was truly nothing short of shocking. In our meeting, Mrs. Brown admitted that the whole reason this ordinance was drafted was based on the urging of a Planned Parenthood insider. Naturally, that insider will be very biased in her version of our actions on the sidewalk. Brown admitted she has never seen video footage of our ministry outside and has never come to any of us to confirm or disaffirm the opposition's claims. She admitted that although she knew how many calls to the police department had been made, she did not even know the content of those calls. What if the calls were actually from us because we have been assaulted? Yet she did not know that. Furthermore, she admitted most of the calls came from the staff inside Planned Parenthood. Seriously? I mean, Planned Parenthood has a vested and monetary interest in getting us to stop marring the already shady reputation of their corrupt organization. She further admitted she did not know if any of us have ever been cited, have ever had a police report filed on us, or had ever been arrested. And the answer is no. None of us have ever been written up or arrested for anything because we are peaceful, law-abiding citizens and moms and dads. If we were doing anything unlawful, wouldn't the officer who is there every day cite us or arrest us? But their hands are tied because, alas, we keep the law. And here's the doozy. Councilwoman Brown said she was using public safety and police data as evidence that the ordinance was needed, right? When I asked her where the police data was coming from, she stated none other than Planned Parenthood's buddy, Officer Sean Mack, the off-duty cop paid by Planned Parenthood. This is outrageous. Any testimony by Sean Mack must be regarded as an obvious conflict of interest. He has harassed us, changed the rules from day to day, and threatened us with disorderly conduct, all for no reason. The City of Columbus police have been wonderful, professional, kind, and even supportive of our work. But not Officer Mack, he's the only one. It has been a process of educating him on our First Amendment rights, and we have it all on video. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Sit down. Thank you. I had a feeling your testimony would go that way, and also a clarification. My name is Ms. Brown, not Mrs. Brown, so thank you. I also would like to open things up for my colleagues if you have any questions regarding. Okay, thank you. I have a question that actually Mitchell Brown is chair of public safety for City Council, and Officer Pryock. Really, either one of you, Prysock, I'm sorry, either one of you can answer this. But does being a special duty officer mean that you have to uphold a different set of laws, or change the duty that you swore to when becoming an officer?
Not only do we have to follow city, local laws, federal laws, we have to uphold standards of the Columbus Police Department. So there are things we can do, things we cannot do, things that are not criminal in nature that we cannot involve ourselves in, and those are the rules that we follow. We've had numerous meetings regarding this matter when I worked the clinic about what we were allowed to do. We were very clear. It was spelled out to us by Mr. Furby, so we were very clear on the rules when we started working.
And also, it's very clear that when an officer is working special duty at any particular facility, it's not about whether or not they have an alignment with that particular facility. They uphold the law. That is their responsibility. That is their objective, and they do that very, very well. And they will do that with anyone who violates the law.
Thank you. And so why does an organization then ask for a special duty officer?
Usually the case is such that when they offer the employment to a special duty officer is because they have had some kinds of problems that have occurred either inside the premises or directly outside the premises. Part of the objective here is looking at this 15 feet law and the person who had the yardstick there so that they can make certain that the patrons who are coming to whatever facility it may be is not subject to harassment or intimidation. And that's exactly what they do.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Also, I think it's really about safety. I mean, when you're asking why are special duty police officers at different facilities, I mean, it is really about safety. I mean, they're at our grocery stores. They're at different venues. They want to make sure that the individuals that, first of all, safety is paramount for the residents of our city, the visitors of our city. That's key. And so when anyone is going to be coming into any facilities, we want to make sure that the employees, the individuals who are accessing that business are safe. And so special duty officers, as Officer Prysock just stated, certainly that's key for them, that people are going to be safe. No matter who they are, safety is key.
And quite honestly, for all of you, the facility would not ask to have special duty officers work there if they didn't have concern for the safety of the employees and the safety of the people who participate, who come in, as well as those who wish to exercise their First Amendment rights. That's the objective. There must be a reason, otherwise they would not hire a police officer to be present.
Thank you.
Sorry. Could you just talk briefly on how this particular ordinance will affect any peaceful protest?
It won't at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker for the ordinance is Michelle Davis. Again, 3-minute rule, name, address, and if you are representing an organization other than yourself. Thank you.
My name is Michelle Davis, and my address is 2492 Edgevale Road in Upper Arlington, 43221. I'm here for the Healthcare Facility Protection Ordinance. This isn't a simple freedom of speech issue. This is about the difference between free speech and harassment. It's about standing up to those who've been bullying women. It's about drawing the line. I worked as a patient escort at Founders Women's Health Center, and for the past several months, I've been standing among the protesters, many of whom I recognize today, outside Planned Parenthood's East Surgical Center, listening to their speeches, commentary, rants, and tirades. What I've heard and experienced is not free speech, it's bullying and intimidation, it's harassment. The insults and slurs leveled at patients, staff, and anyone else perceived to be in favor of Planned Parenthood are atrocious. Those of us who have escorted and worked in clinics are used to the vitriol, but people outside of this group are appalled when they learn how people who may not share the same views as them are treating people. They hate the hate they are projecting, and the patients and their families and friends are frankly scared of these protesters. Miserable, gay, witch, villain, man-hater, death squirt, baby killer, barren, wide load, wicked, lesbian. Just a handful of the names I've been both called and witnessed other clinic workers being called. I've been followed, I've seen clinic workers followed, and I've seen patients followed. If these anti-choice groups were truly only here because of their belief in the First Amendment, then why are they so adamantly against anyone else who wants to exercise free speech? On countless occasions, the protesters outside of Planned Parenthood immediately swarmed me when I arrived and stood outside holding up a sign in favor of Planned Parenthood or women's reproductive rights. The first time this happened, I was absolutely shocked. Several adult males surrounded me, reading from and quoting the Bible, insulting me, questioning me. It was overwhelming and frightening. I was taken completely by surprise as I hadn't experienced protesters that were this overtly aggressive before. When I worked as a clinic escort, my hands were shaking and I was disoriented. Their physical presence was so intense and their voices so loud and threatening that without even realizing it, I was physically reacting to them by inching away and trying to keep it at a safe distance. I went from standing on the sidewalk to being backed up to the curb of the street where there are 4 lanes of traffic. I then moved to a different place on the sidewalk so as to avoid being forced into the street, putting distance between myself and these protesters, only to be followed and pressed toward the street again. This happened several times. They relentlessly pursued me, even though I didn't engage them at all. I was essentially there exercising the same rights they were. The first time this happened, I thought that it may have been a fluke, an extremist group having a bad day or something. Unfortunately, I've since had numerous similar experiences with these people outside of the same Planned Parenthood East facility. And while I believe that they are extremists, it wasn't a fluke. These people are consistently confrontational and aggressive. It's shocking that in today's climate of teaching tolerance and not accepting bullying behavior, this one subculture of people has gone unchecked. These anti-choice protesters are not champions of the First Amendment. They are not free speech advocates. They are aggressors, bullies bent on distorting the First Amendment to justify their intimidation and harassment of women seeking medical care. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You may sit down. Is there any follow-up from my colleagues? Next, I would like to ask on the against side for Megan Smith to please approach the microphone. Reminder of the 3-minute rule, name, address, and any organization you're affiliated with, please, other than yourself.
Hi, my name's Megan Smith. I reside at 4719 Cleveland Avenue in Westerville. And I've been a sidewalk counselor for several years now. I go to the different Planned Parenthoods as well as Founders. And when we look at this, before I really talk about my experience as a sidewalk counselor, I'd really like to talk about more specifically what this ordinance would mean for us. When we look at it, we see a lot of repetition that we've talked about already. We see I think there's 4 main bullet points, and all of them are already covered in the law. We see blocking an abortion facility is already against the law. We know that assaulting or grabbing at women, we can't do that either, and none of us do that. The only thing that's really up for grabs now is the harassment clause. And harassment is defined, as we were talking about earlier, it's very vague, and it's problematic because for someone like me, it stops me from trying to reach out to a woman, to offer her resources, to offer her pamphlets. And it really does boil down. It's very simple. It boils down to freedom of speech. That's really what it comes down to. And I know we've tried to cloud the issues with this or that agenda, but that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to freedom of speech. And it stops women like me from just practicing my First Amendment right of freedom of speech. Obviously, intimidation, yelling, assaulting women at abortion facilities is not who I am, and it's not who any of the sidewalk counselors are, as we haven't seen any police reports of assault or intimidation filed with Columbus on behalf of these Planned Parenthood or any other women. I shouldn't be penalized or censored because people disagree with my beliefs, and I think that's really what it comes down to. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question.
Yep.
Laura, you already answered it, but briefly, it appears to me, just to make sure that I'm understanding the ordinance correctly, B3 says that you must follow and harass. So any language by itself would not fall under this ordinance, but there must be the physical movement of following an individual within this 15-foot perimeter, in addition to the language that will subject you to possibly being prosecuted under this ordinance.
That's correct. And the language itself, it's not
Any language is language that is in knowingly following and harassing, knowing that you are causing inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm following an individual within the 15 feet, all three.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also to the speaker's concern on vagueness, could you again explain where you got the definition for harass that is in this?
the definition for harass.
Began with House Bill 408, but the addition that we put in came from the disorderly conduct statute, which I think a number of individuals have referenced as being a statute that's been on the books for a very long time. There's been a lot of case law regarding disorderly conduct that's defined as recklessly causing inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, and that's where the language came from for harass.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next speaker. I don't know that I will say the first name right, but Clarissa Page. This is 4. Thank you. Name, address, organization of anyone that's not yourself. 3-minute rule.
I'm Clarissa Page. I'm an escort for Planned Parenthood. Good evening. My name is Clarissa, and I have been a volunteer patient escort at Planned Parenthood's East Surgical Center for the past 6 months. This experience has been a rude awakening about abortion access in my own city. It's easy to criticize buffer zones as preventing nonviolent free speech if you do not witness what I witness weekly. What happens outside of our clinic is not peaceful assembly. It is harassment disguised as the First Amendment. These are a few of the things that I have heard or been called while outside of our clinic. Descort, Satanist, you're just a lesbian with a barren womb that wants to kill babies. Your days are numbered once I find out where you live. Smile so you can look good online. I have been told to tie a millstone around my neck and throw myself into the ocean because I am going to hell. I might as well kill myself because Jesus does not love me. Personally, I've been threatened, sexually harassed, filmed. My photos have been posted online, and I am almost always followed to my car. I see people mocking me, threatening me, and enjoying it. I have seen and heard these things on our own city's sidewalks. I volunteer for this position because I am able to deflect this type of behavior. What I am not able to deflect is when the protesters break a client's spirit. I have seen patients shaking in tears, thinking they owe someone an explanation for why they are there. Clinic escorts wouldn't be necessary if protesters didn't harass patients, but they do, so we're there. We can only do so much. We need you to help keep us safe. Constituents depend upon their city to help keep them safe. Nobody should have to be in fear when accessing their legal right to health care. Please help keep patients, staff, escorts, and the community safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any?
I just wanted to,
A couple of different individuals speaking both for and against have used the term buffer zone. And buffer zone is what was addressed by McCullen versus Coakley before the U.S. Supreme Court back in 2014. I know I'm sounding like a lawyer again. But the buffer zone that was addressed in that particular case was literally that. It was 35 feet, and you couldn't enter if you were a protester, and you couldn't do anything within the 35 feet. And that's where the buffer zone kind of language came from. And I want to make it clear that the ordinance that's being contemplated here is not a buffer zone in the sense that was addressed in McCullen versus Coakley. In fact, in Massachusetts, they originally had an 18-foot zone where they also prohibited following and pamphleting and harassing within the 18-foot zone. And Massachusetts police officers indicated that it was difficult for them to discern, and so they asked for, can we just prohibit everything? And that's what Massachusetts did, and that's what the U.S. Supreme Court struck down. But they said that the prohibition and the allowance within the ordinance for, you can't follow and harass within that particular feet is something that was not struck down. So.
I do have a question for Officer Prysock. So the situation that the speaker, the situations that the speaker talked about, were there similar things that you observed over your 2 years at Founders?
Yes. There was a gamut of protesters. Some just came, quietly prayed, and left. Some people just quietly stood up front, held signs. And then there were those out there that were a little bit more aggressive, how they spoke to people when they came to the facility to have a procedure done. Had a lot of patients coming to me asking, is there anything you can do about them? They're saying horrible things to me. I've had people accuse them of touching them or having contact, but when I would ask, hey, can I take a report? I mean, they wouldn't want to. So I got into some disputes with some of the protesters about what they were allowed to do and what they weren't. When I have questions and I'm not sure, I would contact Roger Dickerson, who I work with, or Jeff Furby got involved because I wanted to make sure I was following the rules. I've seen men bring women there, and they've questioned their manhood for allowing females to have this procedure to occur. I've also seen them advise patients coming in that the doctor that was providing the service was a registered sex offender, which was not correct information. I did not get involved in that, but these are just things that I've heard being spoken while I was there. I've seen visitors to the clinic ask people to step away from them at that point, and it still proceeded to continue. I didn't take reports because, again, as it was mentioned earlier, a lot of the patients there do not want to file a report, do not want that in the system. It is public record. It can be pulled. They just wanted it to stop. So I had a thin line, and I had to kind of walk it to make sure I didn't violate patients' rights and I didn't violate the protesters' rights as well. But it just seemed like the envelope was always being pushed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So I have a question for Officer Prysock. Did you ever have an incident where someone threatened the protesters?
Yes, I actually took a report for a protester. He stated that a young man was walking his, I don't know what a relationship was to him, into the facility. Words were exchanged. He asked him to step away. The protester continued. He said that the protester bumped him. So I offered to take a report. The protester demanded that I go in and grab this young man and bring him out and do my job, which I advised him, I can give you a prosecutor's card and you're welcome to go down to the prosecutor's office and file charges. Here's a report number. And that wasn't enough, but I did file a report just to cover myself in case he said I didn't do my job. But at that point, it's a misdemeanor offense. I did not witness it. That was the course of action that we would take if it happened, if I was in your home. If you told me someone pushed you, I'll take a report. It would be up to you to go to the prosecutor's office and file charges from that point.
Next, we have on against the ordinance. I cannot read this handwriting. It looks like begins with a J. I think maybe Joanna or Jolene. Yes, Demit. Yes. If you can please state your hello again. If you could please state your name, address, and 3-minute rule reminder.
My name is Joanne DeMint, and I reside at 7415 Stoutsville Pike, Circleville, Ohio. I just want to thank the the council people for being here. And this young lady here has given some very insightful questions. Before I give my personal testimony, freedom of speech is stated in the United States Constitution has always ensured the public safety by being able to voice our opinions and views without using the vehicle of physical aggression or bodily harm. It acts, as you will, as a pressure valve. The proposed ordinance intent is to censor our basic freedom of speech, which would be content discrimination. Our freedom to speak is not based on the rule that everyone agree with the content. Just the opposite. If persons disagree, we are then able to dialogue. We use our voices to vent our frustrations or find common ground. The First Amendment protects free speech, no matter how unpopular. On all sides of the debate, we can agree that speech is necessary for democracy. Governments ought not to try to abridge speech. They must show how the speech in question poses a genuine danger. Has any such menace been shown? It hasn't. I'm a grandmother. I'm a mother of 4. I come out to Planned Parenthood. We've been there for about a year. We've had no citations against us. We give out Bibles. We try to engage the girls. We have a young girl. We've seen 2 babies. One baby was born, was in the neonatal care that we rescued. I have another young little girl that her little baby was just born. A few months ago, engaged her over the side, and she was distraught. We had numbers. I talked with her. She called me back later and said, "Oh, Joanne, I'm so upset. This and this and this has happened. I'm pregnant. What am I going to do?" I said, "We can get through this together," and we have gotten through it together. We just recently gave her a baby shower. You're looking at a mother that is compassionate. We are passionate about these girls that are going in, being coerced into having these abortions. If you go to the Center for Medical Progress, if you go to the Center for Bioethics Reform, you will see now we know what's going on inside of these buildings, and we're passionate about it. Please, we just beg that you would withdraw this ordinance. This is already on the books. I want to say, too, that keep in mind that we cannot get on the property. We can't even get within arm's length of any of the patients that are coming in. I have not seen one that has been horrified or from me, or if they don't want a Bible, if they don't want the literature to explain the procedures that they're about to go into and have, then that's fine. I take my children up there with me. And also, I'll tell you how compassionate and charitable we are. We were leaving one day going down Hampton Road, and we saw a person come out of his driveway and bang right into the Death Escort volunteer's car. We then reported that and let her know about it.
Thank you for your testimony. I just want to ask again about, because the speaker spoke about free speech, I just want to ask again if peaceful speech and conversation, such as was recounted in 2 stories, if that is affected by this ordinance or made illegal. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on the redundancy question that's come up. Again, I know you spoke to it a little earlier, but could you speak to that again and how we came up with ours?
As we stated earlier, the ordinance deals with some behaviors that are similar to statutes that exist, but it deals with elevated behavior from those statutes. So the disorderly conduct statute does not cover all the behavior that's covered in the ordinance here. The ordinance here requires a higher degree of culpability, thus the higher degree penalty for the violation. And also in terms of the obstructing or blocking, that's more than the disorderly conduct hindering. And also the B4, engaging in a course of conduct when that behavior places another person in reasonable fear of physical harm. Again, that's distinct from the disorderly conduct statute as well. If you line the 2 up side by side, there are behaviors that are covered in this ordinance that would not be covered by existing law. The other thing is the assault provision, and that was discussed, the unwanted touching. Unwanted touching in and of itself does not violate the assault statute, but it would if you were engaging in unwanted physical contact in order to physically obstruct or block someone. That's only covered by B1.
I have another question. I'm going to. It's a scenario, and if you could tell me how it would, if this ordinance would apply. But say an individual who is there to engage with a young lady or a young man who is entering into the facility. They are offering documentation from their religious affiliation. They are just saying, would you be willing to take this pamphlet? Are you willing to take this Bible? They're standing on the public sidewalk. Would that be in violation of this ordinance?
Without knowing all the specific facts about where the public sidewalk is in relationship, the act itself of saying, would you like a Bible, would you like to have the understanding, would you like to have the pamphlet, would not violate anything here. If they grabbed onto them and said, I need you to come see this, thus blocking their ability to go into or prohibiting their ability to go into the facility, if they stand in front of them and that person moves around them, they go in front of them again, that kind of behavior. But the actual act of saying, I want to discuss something with you, would you like to see this pamphlet, having that conversation, none of that would violate the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
Yes, thank you. So just listening, it's certainly that, I mean, just the response that Councilmember Page has shared, that certainly if you are, listen to that scenario. So for those of you who are saying you want to just give material to individuals or just share a few words, you can do that. You can do that. That's not changing by this. I think the key of the words are if you're obstructing, if you're touching, if you are, which no one wants to be touched. No one wants, if you're handing something, that's okay. Here's something, but so that's, I think that's the key to this. I'm sorry, if they want to give more testimony, sure, we want to hear more testimony. But certainly, I think we've got to continue just to listen to what the attorney is saying, what this legislation happens to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. We are now going to hear from someone for the ordinance, Jackie Mostow. 3-minute rule, name and address, and if you have an affiliation with an organization.
Hi, my name is Jackie Mostow. I live at 1483 Belmont Avenue in Columbus, and I'm associated with Medical Students for Choice. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk here today. I'm here today to support the ordinance, and I want to express my deep, deep gratitude to you and everyone else who helped introduce it. It's such a breath of fresh air to support an ordinance that intends to improve access to women's health services. I could speak today as a woman, a healthcare consumer, or as a victim of harassment outside a health center. It would all be genuine, but it would be looking backwards. In an effort to look forward to how I hope to see Columbus's comprehensive reproductive health care functioning within the community, I'm going to speak from the perspective of a healthcare provider. I'm currently in my 3rd year of medical school and plan to dedicate my career to providing the best care possible to my patients, specifically women in need of reproductive health and family planning services. As a future healthcare provider, my worst fear is that a patient would feel nervous to access care due to something completely out of my control. Routine healthcare services, such as vaccines and medical procedures, are indeed terrifying to some people. Fortunately, we are trained during medical school and throughout residency to put patients at ease. I wish we could make getting stitches as palatable as a chocolate bar, but unfortunately, some parts of our jobs are inherently uncomfortable. That being said, the act of walking into a clinic should never cause a patient, a provider, or a staff member fear or intimidation or feelings of being harassed. Part of the art of medicine is facilitating ways for patients to make choices that reflect what they need. These discussions require trust and confidence in the provider and in the patient's ability to make decisions for themselves. Protesters who are in such proximity to the patients and healthcare facilities affect the quality of conversations that happen in clinics. And something that we've been talking about here, that protesters speak to distraught patients entering clinics. And I can attest to the fact that there are counselors who are trained inside these clinics to provide option counseling and to ensure that no patient is being coerced into this decision and that it is their choice that they are making with informed information. And that is part of my duty and everyone's duty as a healthcare provider when we give patients the role of managing their own care. I'm so excited for Columbus to lead the way in Ohio to protecting access to healthcare services. Thank you for all you do for the community, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You may sit. Thank you. Are there any follow-ups from the speaker? Okay. Next, speaking against the ordinance, we have Dave Danbenmeyer. Daubenmeyer. Please state your name, address, and organization, and a reminder of the 3-minute rule, sir.
My name's Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Box 744, Hebron, Ohio. I'm at the clinic 3 days a week. I've been since August. I'm there every morning. In fact, they had a nice picture of my goatee. Maybe y'all saw when she put it up there. Some things I think are really important for us all to consider. We're talking about limiting free speech here, right? Yet, up to this point, we've had no evidence. I go to the clinic 3 days a week. There is a police officer always there. If any woman's being harassed, blocked, grabbed, stopped, shook, scared, officer is right there to do it. Is there any evidence of any arrests, any police reports of this happening to anybody? I met with Mr. Roberts yesterday in council, and he didn't have any. I'm wondering, is there any available? Do we have any documented evidence that any of these accusations that are being made are in fact taking place? So if they're not, if people are being harassed and blocked and grabbed, the police officer ought to be fired. What is he doing? No evidence of it. We asked him for evidence that these things are going on. See, anybody can come in here and tell stories. Anybody can come in here and make up lies. Anybody can do that. I heard this, and I heard this, and I heard this. We're talking about restricting the free speech rights of American citizens on an issue they feel very passionately about, and there is no evidence that this has even taken place. No evidence at all. Now, I want you to also know this. I was down there. I'm there 3 days a week, and I'm loud. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They're killing little babies down there. And I tell the men down there that they better realize they're killing somebody else's grandbaby. Huh? Those death squads are standing there killing somebody else's grandbaby, and they don't even know it. And I'm contending for those little babies. And I'm going to continue to contend. I'm very loud. You're going to put me back 15 feet. Do you know now that I have to stand in Main Street? I now have to stand in Main Street for fear that an officer might say I'm harassing, for fear that an officer might say somebody's feeling uncomfortable. I now have to stand in the street. Something's wrong. Hey, I might be on your side. Could you please produce some evidence rather than hearsay evidence? Because, oh, I felt bad, and I felt bad, and this lady felt bad, and this lady felt bad, and this lady felt bad. Hey, if it doesn't fit, we must acquit. It's what Johnny Cochran said. Where's some evidence? It's easy to lie. It's easy to lie. I've heard some in here today, too. I've heard some lying in here today because I'm there. I see what goes on. I don't see a lot of you. I don't see a lot of you. Huh? A lot of liars. I want some evidence. And I would hope, Congressperson Brown, that before any of you act on this, you'll get some evidence, that you'll delay this hearing, say, let's get the evidence. And if this is going on, then first of all, let's fire that officer because he hasn't done his job. And if it's doing it, then we'll pass an ordinance.
Thank you, sir. I would like to please ask you not to applaud per the rules we discussed at the beginning. And you know, I do want to note again the free speech components of this ordinance and the demonstration that we saw with the tape measure. Inside that 15 feet, is someone allowed to peacefully protest?
Yes. It's not a buffer zone. You'd have to follow them.
And again, to help clarify, if a prosecutor is going to prove the things in violation of within that 15 feet, right, follow and harass and et cetera. Excuse me, sir, you had your opportunity to speak. You availed yourself of it. Please now be polite like the rest of the audience. So within that 15 feet, if a prosecutor is proving, can you go through that again, please?
Yes, we'd have to prove that they knowingly followed that individual and harassed them while following them within the 15 feet.
So speaking, even loudly, even very loudly, can occur within 15 feet? Or,
yes, it can.
anywhere
Yes,
that
it
it
can.
currently does?
Yes, it can. As long as, again, that the language doesn't violate other statutes. You can't, there's disorderly conduct, there's taunting to fight, that sort of thing. So threatening harm, that would also obviously not be prohibited. But if it is speaking, this is what I believe, this is what you should believe, this is what I think you should do, I think you're horrible, all of those sorts of things, unless you're following them within the 15 feet, you can continue to do it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else? All right, the next speaker is for the ordinance, and these next two, unfortunately, are our final two because we are 3 minutes to 7, so we're actually going to be going over a slight bit. For the ordinance is, excuse me, Bucksy Jones, and if you could please approach the microphone, your name, your address, if you're affiliated with an organization, and reminder of the 3-minute rule.
Good evening. My name is Bucksy. I work at the Planned Parenthood East Surgical Center at 3255 East Main Street, Columbus, Ohio. I consider myself a resident expert on obstruction and harassment at reproductive health care facilities based on my experience as follows. I have been active in reproductive health care advocacy since 2012. To date, I have worked or volunteered at 6 different reproductive health care facilities in and around Central Ohio. The text of Councilmember Brown's proposed ordinance cites the sharp increase in calls for police assistance at local reproductive health care facilities in 2015. When I was assaulted by a regular sidewalk counselor, in my former role as a local patient safety escort, I made one of those calls. Weeks later, on my very first day of work at Columbus East Surgical Center, another sidewalk counselor, whom I had never seen in my life, rushed up behind my car, recorded me as I approached the building, and shrieked that I was a murderer. These are only a few of my many personal experiences with supposedly well-meaning sidewalk counselors. I have heard countless stories from patients about being followed, verbally degraded, photographed, video recorded, threatened, and even lured to deceptive faux clinics that don't provide anything like the comprehensive, high-quality care that my coworkers and I provide at Planned Parenthood. This is not counseling. This is not health care. This is harassment, this is obstruction, and this should be against the law. I have heard many people proclaim that measures like the proposed protection ordinance are an issue of personal freedom. I wholeheartedly agree. My dedicated coworkers and I deserve the freedom to perform our critically important work without fear of harassment, intimidation, or assault, just like everyone else. Our patients deserve the freedom to exercise their constitutionally protected right to access health care without being shamed, threatened, or touched by strangers, just like anyone else. For these reasons, I am delighted to speak in support of this ordinance that champions personal freedom. I am touched by the compassion that Councilmember Brown has shown for the safety and well-being of the patients I serve, and I look forward to breathing a little easier on my morning commute after this ordinance is passed, knowing that I am more safe and more free.
Are there any? I'd like to reiterate that there is no clapping. I know it's really annoying to be the naggy rule stickler, but such as it is. Does anyone have any follow-up on the speaker? Okay, our final speaker, and this is against the ordinance, is Tanika Clements. And if you could please come up and state your name, address, if you have an affiliation other than yourself, and also a reminder of the 3-minute rule.
My name is Tanika Clements, and I reside at 5997 Hampstead Lane, Columbus, Ohio. August of 2011, I found out I was pregnant. I wasn't ready financially to have another child. I was pregnant alone, and I decided I wanted an abortion. So I went to meet a friend that was at a Chase Bank, and where I met David Law, and he showed me this picture. At the time I was 11 weeks, and he showed me, he had this picture. And I told him my story, and he prayed for me. We prayed through it. And it was then that I decided not to go through with it. I mean, in not any way was I harassed or anything. I was never harassed. But I look at my son today, and I thank God that he was there, that David Law was there, and to help me get through that, and to give me another chance to make me rethink my decision I wasn't sure of anyway. So, and this is my son. That I just thank God that I met him. So that's all I'd say. I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, please. And I thank you for your testimony, and I want to ask the city attorney again if the interaction that was described by the speaker would be prohibited under this ordinance.
No, it would not.
Okay, thank you. So we have come to a close of speaker testimony. I would like to just give my colleagues an opportunity to say anything if there's anything they'd like to say. Okay.
Councilmember Brown, Chair Brown, I would just want to applaud you for the diligent work in putting together a public hearing where I think we heard from everybody, heard both sides, but a very difficult, tough conversation to have. I appreciate hearing from everyone. I think that this is where we come together to make tough decisions. And from what I heard from you, from our speakers, and from the city attorney's office, I personally am going to support this ordinance and support your efforts in passing it. I certainly agree with what we've heard this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Is there anything that our presenters have that they'd like to add? No. Okay. All right. Just in closing, I want to thank everyone for being here to participate in the legislative process. Hearing from citizens is how we do our jobs, how we analyze legislation, and how we consider a vote for or against something. So I appreciate all of you being here for this process. I just want to add, and it's a little bit repetitive of what I said in the opening, but women deserve to be able to access health care without being harassed, without being intimidated. There's no other legal health care service that people are blocked from accessing. And as we've seen increases in violence, nobody can tell me that the vitriol has not increased. In 2015 across the country, there were 94 death threats. And we take violence very seriously as council members. I'll speak for myself. As a council member, I take violence very seriously, and preventing violence and protecting the public safety is of utmost importance to us doing our jobs. There is no other legal health situation where people are blocked from accessing their care. And not only do the women deserve access without being harassed and intimidated, but healthcare workers deserve to be able to do their jobs without fear of harassment, intimidation, and violence. And I think one thing I was really hoping that this assortment of people would help to get across is that peaceful prayer, and peaceful protest are protected as free speech rights under the First Amendment of our Constitution, and they are upheld in this ordinance. And the city attorney took great care to make sure that we put forth a bill that did protect free speech rights, because we take all constitutionally protected rights seriously. So I want to thank again my council members. I really want to thank the staff of City Council. It's actually, this room doesn't look that glamorous and all that, but it actually is a lift to do a hearing off-site. But we wanted it in the community so that people could easily come. So I really want to thank the staff, my staff in particular, Kelsey and James, thank you. And thank you again to the presenters. And with that, we will close.